Hey everyone, welcome to episode 103 of the Talking Friars podcast. Ben Fadden, your host. Today I wanted to come to you after Rob Manfred spoke to the media, spoke to reporters in Orlando after the conclusion of the Major League Baseball owners meetings. And so the big takeaways, I'll go over that. I'll go over some of the things that he said. Kevin Acee came out with an article today about the Padres' potential moves that they might make and kind of their attitude going into post-lockout action, if you will. And Keith Law came out with this top 20 prospect list for the Padres farm system. So I'll go over that as well, give you some takeaways from that. So we got a full episode for you today. Hope you enjoy. Thank you for watching and listening, and let's get started. So Rob Manfred, like I mentioned, spoke to the media in Orlando about the CBA discussions that he was having with the Players Association. He did talk about the whole Tampa Bay Rays and not going to Montreal and all that, but no one really cares about that except Rays fans. The big issue at hand was the negotiations and when were we going to start spring training? When is an agreement going to happen? What are the rules? And so he spoke a little bit about that. The news coming out of it here, Major League Baseball has agreed on a universal DH and a draft lottery. That's what he said. And that there would not be any draft pick compensation for free agent signings. I believe that's what he means by that. But no universal DH. So that's the first major point. That's obviously good news for the Padres because that increases their chances of scoring more runs, obviously. I know it does for everyone else, but there are situations where the Padres, they're better off, obviously, with a DH, especially if they get a Nelson Cruz, if they get Kyle Schwarber. I know everyone wants to talk about Nelson Cruz as being the big target because, they were already interested in him last year, even playing second base. And he had the eye emoji on Twitter that he was talking about, that he tweeted out on Twitter. So the interest definitely goes, the number one interest goes to Nelson Cruz. And I agree with that. Definitely on like a 1 or 2 year deal. But long-term, I think it should probably be just a situation where they develop guys and like a Joshua Mears or a James Wood, and they might be able to occupy that DH spot most of the time. But I think it should be a position where they can just give guys rest. They can have Fernando play there. They can have Manny play there more. They can have Jake Cronenworth, in that spot, Grisham in that spot. They could have Jorge Alfaro in that spot, who they brought in before the lockout. So I think long-term, it should be more of a revolving door, if you will, just a rotating position of who's going to fill that DH slot. I think that just is better because it's not like National League where one guy's taking up the position and you have Manny and Tatis and all that. They have to sit on the bench when they're not playing. They can hit only and kind of have essentially a day off their feet while you still get their bat in the lineup. But as for 1 year, 2 year deals, I do think that having a Nelson Cruz or a Kyle Schwarber like that, I would be definitely on board with that because they're trying to win right now. They need to win right now. They need to make the postseason this year. And having those guys, having a Nelson Cruz, having someone like a Kyle Schwarber in there, that would really help their lineup, their run production, which is something that they really struggled with. And that will really help, especially if Eric Hosmer is still on the roster, which I'll get to a little bit later, because he just hasn't produced as much as Padre fans obviously would have liked and what he's earning. He's nowhere near producing to that level. So universal DH will be implemented. They have agreed upon that. Major League Baseball also draft lottery to kind of decrease the chances of teams wanting to tank so that they can get the number one pick. With the draft lottery, it has not been reported how many teams would be in the draft lottery. I think the Players Association wants 8. Major League Baseball wants 3. So there is a gap there. But at least having a lottery should lower the chances of teams just totally tanking for a top 3 pick when it's not guaranteed, depending on how many teams are in the lottery. And it increases the chances, therefore, of teams wanting to compete more, especially if there's an expanded playoffs as well, which is something that they've talked about. So universal DH in, draft lottery in, draft pick compensation seems to be gone. The status of spring training is another thing that Rob talked about. No change right now. So it was expected that he was going to announce spring training being delayed, the start of spring training, which is supposed to start next week. Pitchers and catchers reporting usually. But according to him, the start time is going on as planned. Now, I expect that to change because I don't expect the players to accept Major League Baseball's offer on Saturday, which is their next bargaining session. But Rob Manfred was saying that spring training was going to start on the regular time schedule based on the fact that he hasn't heard from the players' side on their most recent proposal. So it's starting on time as of now, according to Manfred, but I would expect that to change after Saturday's meeting because, as we know, the players in the league aren't agreeing on very many things right now. Rob obviously wanted to highlight the universal DH and the draft lottery and the draft pick compensation to kind of take people's attention away from all the other things that they're not agreeing upon. The increase in the luxury tax to a bigger number than what the owners want, instead of just 4 million, make it more. A lot of other things that I've talked about on past episodes. He didn't want to highlight that, obviously. He was talking more about the positive things. That's how he started off his press conference. So another thing he talked about, teams will not play Major League spring training games with just a bunch of replacement minor league players. So now that you could say that like that does happen already, Ben, and there are already a lot of minor leaguers that do play, and especially early on, the regular starters get like 2 innings and they're out. I agree, but he's talking about if the two sides, the Players Association and the league, don't reach an agreement by the start of when the spring training games are supposed to start, they're not going to force these spring training games to continue to be played when no major league rosters can play in them. That was another piece of news. Another major piece of news, kind of combined. Rob Manfred said that there will be a 4-week buildup. That's what makes sense. That's what he said. A 4-week buildup between when from the start of spring training to opening day. 4-week buildup between, which is expected. I agree with that. You want to limit injuries. I think it was like 3 weeks in 2020. There were more injuries. And then before spring training, the start of spring training, Rob Manfred said that there only needs to be like a week between when the CBA is agreed upon to the start of spring training camp, which is kind of good, but that was surprising to me. I was expecting at least 2 weeks, because you got to remember how many free agents there are after this agreement is made between the players in the league, how much activity there's going to be. I thought he was going to say that there was at least going to be 2 weeks between the CBA being agreed upon and the start of spring training, because there are so many free agents out there. I'm not even just talking about the big name guys. I'm talking about the smaller name guys as well. But there's so many guys out there: Chris Bryant, Nelson Cruz, Kyle Schwarber, Jorge Soler, Eddie Rosario, Chris Bryant, Carlos Correa, Trevor Story, Clayton Kershaw. I could keep going. There's so many free agents. Tommy Pham's another one that are out there that need to be signed. And there's 30 teams. There's a lot of movement, trade discussion. Teams aren't supposed to be, I'm sure they probably are, but they're not supposed to be talking about possible trades with one another right now. And so those discussions need to be made if they want those trades to happen before spring training. So I think only allowing 1 week between the agreement, the CBA agreement, and the start of spring training isn't enough time. Hopefully a deal is done where they get 2 weeks in between. But in terms of, I guess, the season being played in the length that it's supposed to be, it is good news because that gives the two sides, I guess, another week, right? to get a deal done and still be able to start spring training on time and still be able to start the season on time on opening day on March 31st, than it would have if they went with what I was thinking with, having there be 2 weeks between the agreed upon CBA and the start of spring training. So 4-week buildup in spring training, and there's only, Rob Manfred said, about a week all they need between the CBA agreed upon and the start of spring training. But another thing to take into account is, the winter meetings didn't even happen this year. So the winter meetings is usually a week. There's usually all conversation going on all times of the day then, deals done. And then that's not even taking into consideration all of the free agents, all of the roster moves that need to be made. So I thought 2 weeks, but 1 week is, I guess, all they need. So that was another piece of news. Rob also said he's optimistic of having a season start on time. He's an optimist. Of course, he's going to say that as the league. That's not really that big piece of news. He's going to say he's optimistic. What does he get? What? How bad of a look would that be if you'd say, I'm not optimistic starting the season? He also said that it would be disastrous that if the season didn't start on time, that they lose major league games. So if an agreement isn't agreed upon, for the lack of better terms, that would be pretty embarrassing to the league, after the commissioner just went out and said weeks earlier that it would be disastrous if the season didn't start on time. So for him to say it would be disastrous, you hope that they're really, really motivated now to get a deal done. But a deal didn't happen on time in 2020. I know different circumstances, and it doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of urgency on both sides to get an agreement done. I know a counter proposal happened, and it will be presented to the players on Saturday, and there'll be discussions then. But there was over 40 days between when the lockout happened and the first proposal, I think, between the league and players. So they weren't urgent then. That was a lot of wasted time then. So now you all have to make up that time and be urgent all of a sudden now. The players have said that they want to get back to the bargaining table, so you hope that some urgency happens. But I'm probably not optimistic as Rob Manfred is, for the season to start on time, just considering how far off they are. It seems like, with so many things, with the Evan Drellich piece that came out, I think last week, 2 weeks ago, about there was 5 different factors that they were off about. So I'm not as optimistic, but again, obviously I'm hoping for Rob to be right and that there is optimism. Another piece of news, let's see here. So it wasn't a big piece of news, but in terms of the timeline, that's kind of what I wanted to move to, actually. The timeline, so you say that there's a 4-week buildup. They need 1 week from the agreed upon CBA to the start of spring training, so that's 5 weeks. And so if you look on the calendar, March 31st opening day, so the end of February 27th, 28th, 29th, something around then, you'd want an agreement to be done based on the parameters that Rob Manfred set earlier today in his press conference. So we'll see if that happens, but like I mentioned, February 1st as kind of my date earlier this offseason to start getting worried. It's February 10th now, so obviously you should be worried. Now to be worried about there being less games in the season, that date has kind of moved now to late February at the very, very latest, if we're going on the timeline of 1 week between spring training and the agreed upon CBA, and then 4-week build-up time. So that's the timeline I would look at based on Manfred and his comments. So now, after Manfred's comments, I did want to move on to Kevin Acey, San Diego Union Tribune's piece that he wrote this morning about the Padres' possible action post-lockout. What are they looking to do? What is the front office's views on Hosmer, and if maybe they can move him? Interest in Seiya Suzuki, that was mentioned, so I did want to move into that. AC wrote, quote, Padres are expected to make a run at Japanese star Seiya Suzuki. He could, end quote, he could fit that $10 to $15 million average annual value in the Padres payroll that would fit to be under the luxury tax, I believe, even with Eric Hosmer on the roster. So that's good news. So based on what AC is saying there, that might be the player that the Padres would rather go after instead of spending $30 million on Nick Castellanos or Chris Bryant. They might want to go in the Suzuki thing, the Seiya Suzuki Avenue, that route. And I wouldn't be like mad about it and say like, oh, this was a terrible signing, because he did hit over 300 in Japan. He has power, but I would be a little bit hesitant because he just hasn't played in the major leagues yet. And you could say, well, Ben, that's the same thing as CJ Abrams as a prospect or something, right? Coming up, he hasn't played in the big leagues yet. Yeah, but he's still facing upper 90s velocity in the minor leagues with the top pitching prospects. Suzuki, the Japan velocity isn't as consistently high as it is in Major League Baseball. And Kim, they just signed him from overseas, and he struggled, hitting wise, offense wise. And I don't want to compare Kim and Suzuki because Suzuki's a better hitter than Kim. At least that's what's expected. But with that said, just recent experience with the Padres bringing in someone from Japan, that didn't work out, at least in the first season offensively. Kim was great defensively. Suzuki doesn't seem as strong defensively as Kim is. So I would just be hesitant. I'll say it this way. Money-wise, yeah, Suzuki seems to work better. But in terms of me being more confident in the power-hitting outfielder that they signed to be the starting left fielder, I'd be more confident in Castellanos or Bryant because they've had success already in the big leagues with power numbers. Bryant's won an MVP, a Rookie of the Year. Castellanos was an All-Star last year. So I would just be more confident in those two than Suzuki. But there's other guys like John Schaefer on Extra 1360, big fan of him. He likes the show. He's been on our show before. He's a big Suzuki guy. And so there's other opinions of it, obviously. You can disagree. Again, I wouldn't be saying that, oh, this is a terrible signing, waste of money, but I'd just be hesitant. That's all. But Padres are expected to make a run at Suzuki, according to AC. We'll see how that plays out. Now, moving to Eric Hosmer, interesting comments. Sources told Kevin AC, quote, the Padres baseball operations department has essentially given up on Hosmer, becoming the contributor the organization envisioned when he signed in 2018, end quote. Not a surprise, as you can read on gaslightball.com, as you can see on my instant reaction video I put out on YouTube, on Twitter, Instagram yesterday about Christopher Mad Dog Russo's comments about the Padres needing to be patient with Hosmer and stick with him. You know that I'm not in favor of that. And the Padres organization, baseball ops department, according to AC, aren't as well. Now, it seems like because of the barriers with a Hosmer trade, his salary, them not wanting to give up Robert Hassel, someone like that, CJ Abrams, or maybe a deal, involving Eric Hosmer to another team is unlikely, and he's expected to be the starting first baseman still come opening day 2022, according to AC. So while that stinks, the front office is just like the fans. They know that Hosmer is not going to be the Kansas City Hosmer. They know that Hosmer is never going to live up to his contract unless he hits these big home runs in the postseason, Padres win the World Series and all that. Even then, according to Fangraphs and the dollar value, he still won't live up to it. He's made a base salary of $80 million over the first 4 years of his contract. According to Fangraphs, his value is only $4.5 million. So big gap, $75+ million gap in terms of what he's earned, what he's taken home and spent on his wedding and stuff, as we saw on social media. And the difference between that and the money that he's actually earned is big. But it's expected, my reaction to that Hosmer news of him being the opening day first baseman expectedly. Not surprised. It's just going to be hard to trade him. Teams just don't want him and that contract. So that's not surprising. And it's not surprising the baseball operations department has given up on Hosmer, being that contributor they envisioned when they signed him in 2018, because they've seen what all the fans have. They're not dumb. They've seen the numbers. They look at the numbers. They've seen the dollar value of what he's actually earned. They see him on the field. They see his negative defensive WAR, since coming to San Diego. They see, having a 1-win season last year, according to Baseball Reference. They see that. They see that there's so many other first basemen who are at such lower salaries that can produce at a higher level than Hosmer is. So they know what we know. And I'm sure they think the same thing. They don't want him on the roster. That's just what I would think, according to AC and what he's saying. So I guess my takeaway is I like that the front office isn't just trying to say, oh, the whole Christopher Russo thing, saying, oh, Hosmer won a World Series. That was like 7 years ago. Oh, Hosmer won 4 Gold Gloves. Yeah, none of them was San Diego. They're not clinging on to those things. So I do like that part of it. But bottom line is, will he be traded or will he not? We're just going to have to see. And part of that, the thing about, brings back to Manfred, him saying that there is only 1 week that they need between the agreed upon CBA and the start of spring training. That tells me that there's no way that Hosmer's going to get dealt. I mean, there's just so many things with that trade, prospects, how much money the Padres are willing to eat, teams even interested in him. There's just a lot of things. And then you're not even considering that the Padres have to go get outfield help and one more bench bat, whether that's Tommy Pham or someone else, maybe relief help. There's so many things that need to be done. 1 week isn't enough just to somehow trade Hosmer, unless there's been some things going on that shouldn't be happening behind the scenes, with Preller talking with other teams about Hosmer or something like that, because I just don't think that's enough time for a deal to be done. So that was the AC article. Again, the major tidbits out of that: Padres not expected, or they are expected to make a run at Seiya Suzuki out of Japan, and the Padres baseball ops department has given up on Hosmer becoming the contributor they envisioned him to be in 2018. He's expected to be the starting first baseman as of now in 2022. Again, it seems like I'm bashing Hosmer and I hate Hosmer, and I don't hate Hosmer. I'm just disappointed with the way he's played. And I hope that if he's in a Padre uniform, I really sincerely hope that he can turn it around and he can, earn more of the contract, at least on a year-to-year basis, than he has in his first 4 years with the Padres. So I'm a diehard Padre fan. I want him to do well. I want him to be that Kansas City Hosmer, but I remain optimistic that Michael Bedard can help with that. But I'm just based on the past, based on past stats, his history here, it's not looking good. His history has said that he's unwilling to change. That AC article that came out, I think, last year, that he was, okay with just being the player that he was and not having that launch angle and not developing launch angle, and he was just okay with just being where he is. I was frustrated. A lot of other Padre fans were frustrated with that. So it's just not looking good, but I do hope that he turns it around if he's still a Padre in 2022 and finishes out the contract strong, or at least until they find someone to take some of the contract, because I'm a Padre fan. Anyone on the Padres, I want them to do well. So that's the AC article. Last thing I wanted to talk about was Keith Law, the Athletic, coming out with his top 20 article, top 20 Padres prospects list. And I'll share my screen for the YouTube audience. I wrote about this on gaslightball.com. We'll go through the list here. Keith Law, again, he did this. This came out on Wednesday, I believe. CJ Abrams, number 1. Robert Hassel, III, is number 2. Mackenzie Gore is 3. Luis Camposano, 4. Jackson Merrill, 5. That's the top 5. And 6 through 10, Joshua Mears is at 6, James Wood, Angelis, the shortstop, at 8, Robert Gasser, 9, Sammy Zavala, outfielder, at 10. And then the YouTube audience, they can read the last 10 on their own. Costa, or I'll read it. Costa, 11, shortstop, or Ornelas, I think is how you pronounce it. The outfielder at 12, Justin Lange out at LSU, I believe. 13, Lizarraga, 14, Eggy Rosario, 15, Cedeno, the infielder, at 16, Brandon Valenzuela, catcher is the 17th ranked prospect according to Keith Law. Adrian Martinez, who's in El Paso right now. Number 18, Kevin Kopps, drafted last year out of Arkansas, Golden Spikes winner. He's already in his 20s, 19, and Ray Kerr, 20. Steven Wilson is an option to come up as well. Jarlin Susanna, the international stud that we just got, he's in there as a notable mention, honorable mention, whatever you want to say. Ethan Elliott as well. My takeaways here, and we will go back to just me here. CJ Abrams, obviously he's the top ranked prospect, deserves to be 5-tool player. I mean, the power, maybe not so much, but Kevin Charity on episode 102, you can go watch that, listen to that on the podcast or watch on YouTube. He said that CJ Abrams could hit 15, 20 home runs a year. He has speed. He's going to be an up the middle player, whether that's shortstop. Some believe that he could play a better defensive shortstop than Fernando, and I kind of agree with that. Second base, center field, he's going to be somewhere up the middle. Gore, he's been up and down, literally between AAA and Peoria recently, and fixing his mechanics up and down, some ups and downs with that. He could impact the Padres, but I don't think it's smart for the Padres to, bank on Gore coming up. I think that's why you saw them bring in Nick Martinez, and I think that's why they're hopeful, obviously, that Clevenger, Darvish, Snow, Musgrove, Paddock, Weathers, Morejon, they can all stay healthy. Because you can't bank on it because of just the up and downs. You just can't rely on him producing and pitching well all of a sudden. And I think this lockout, like Kevin Charity told me, it definitely hurts. It hurts that he can't talk with Ruben Niebla and work through things during this lockout. The longer the lockout goes on, the less time they have between spring training to, get a head start on it. So that's Gore. Campusano, maybe he's traded, maybe he's not. I don't see him cracking the opening day roster as the roster's set right now because they're not going to have 4 guys on it, you'd think. With the DH, that adds in another possibility, but that would be unfortunate if Campusano's the DH or Alfaro's the DH and they have 4 catchers technically on it, because that means they didn't get Nelson Cruz, they didn't get Kyle Schwarber, they, didn't get a DH. That would be disappointing, especially with the universal DH. Now we know it's going to be implemented, like I mentioned earlier in the episode. So that's Campusano. He might be attached to a Hosmer deal. Who knows? I'm still high on him. I think Hassel rightly should be ranked ahead of him because of his upside, I'm just a big fan of Hassel. Hassel would be number 2 on my list behind Abrams. I believe like he is on Kevin Charity's. He could be a 5-tool player. Center field is what he's playing right now, it seems like. Great arm. I love that he has great discipline. Plate discipline. You don't really see that a lot in, power hitters nowadays. Definitely seems like he would be a better player than Grisham. So impact major league outfielder. I'm excited to see more of him. I really, really am excited. Hopefully that he continues on this level and he and CJ can be up in the big leagues. Maybe not this year, both of them, but by opening day 2023. That would be exciting. 2 guys to watch, Kevin Kopps and then Ray Kerr. Both of them, why do I say those two? Those 2 can both possibly impact the major league roster at some point this year because of their age. Both are, I believe, 24, 25 years old, Kopps, and then Kerr is, I think, like 27-ish, I think, maybe 25. But they're both in their 20s. They both have experience. Ray Kerr has already gotten to AAA. He's already topping at 102 with his fastball. He has the skills. It's more about throwing strikes, kind of like Gore, staying in the strike zone, throwing strikes. And then with Kopps, we might see him. He pitched with an ERA under 1 in his first professional season. I believe, he pitched 5 years at Arkansas in the SEC. So he's pitched in a lot of big games. That's the best college conference in the country. Golden Spikes Award winner for the best college player in the country, I believe. That's what that award is. He won that before being drafted by the Padres. So both of those guys, because of their age, because of their ability to show that they can pitch definitely in the professional level, at the professional level. Cops, I believe, made it to Double-A last year, even in just one season with the Padres. So he could just keep moving up. And if he's at this rate, he's going to be on the team at some point. Injuries happen in the bullpen. So I think he could, be on the roster at some point. He and Kurt will make an appearance, I think, at some point in 2022 for the Padres. So let me know your thoughts on this video. Again, Manfred, he spoke to the media. AC coming out with that article at the San Diego Union Tribune, talking about Hosmer's future. Padres front office essentially giving up on Hosmer producing at the level they thought he was going to when he came in 2018. Them being interested and probably going to target Seiya Suzuki after the lockout. And then Keith Law's top 20 prospect list. Thank you so much for listening and watching. Until next time, let's go Padres. Should have an interview next week as well, maybe another episode this week. Stay tuned. This has been episode 103 of the Talking Friars podcast. See ya.